Hello, everyone, and welcome to Casual Experts Only. I'm Mike, and this is Luke. Or which way? Yeah,
Hey.
there we go. That's Luke. And yeah, today we're going to be talking about a little bit about Cocaine Bear that came out pretty recently,
Mhm.
and also talk about the animated movie All Star Superman. I guess before we talk about Cocaine Bear, how are you? Have you like watched or fan at all of like the Rocky and Creed movies or anything?
No, I've seen the first one once on an airplane a couple of years ago, but
Okay.
I haven't.
Okay, I was just curious because yeah, I just want to talk real quick about Creed 3, which I saw
Yeah,
yesterday.
go for it.
And like yeah, and like I if you were like into it, I didn't want to put any
Yeah.
spoilers or anything, but so like mild spoiler, but I'm not going to talk too much about it. But yeah, so Creed 3, like I've been a huge Rocky fan since I was a kid. It's kind of like my dad
Hmm.
introduced me to the franchise, and I think the Creed movies are super good. They're probably the best. It's probably arguably the best like legacy sequel spin-off franchise. I think it
Okay.
does a really good job balancing like the new character with what's come before without
Hmm.
making it like gratuitous, like
Right.
remember this,
Hmm.
because they make Rocky like an actual mentor character to Adonis Creed, who is the son of Apollo Creed and who is Rocky's friend and all that. So
Right.
it's a really cool series of movies, and the new one is pretty dang good. This one is
Mm.
Michael B. Jordan's, I believe, directorial debut,
Oh, okay.
which is pretty cool. Like he did a very good job, especially like it's kind of a like I kind of feel like more actors should probably get into directing because they like there's like we have John Krasinski with the Quiet Place movies and Michael
Yeah,
B.
and
Jordan
Jordan
with his
Peele.
yeah, and Jordan Peele, yeah, like
Yeah.
they seem to know their way around the behind and in
Mhm.
front of the camera. So I feel like
Right.
they seem to kind of know what they're doing. But yeah, this movie's really good. Jonathan Majors is in it. He's like the main antagonist.
Hmm.
Really good actor. I mean, we've talked briefly about him before, but yeah, he's super
Yeah.
good. First thing I saw him in was Last Black Man in
Yeah, San
San
Francisco.
Francisco.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good
but
movie.
yeah, it is. And then he was in Lovecraft Country, which I saw part of, and he's just super good in everything. Like he's
Mhm.
one of those actors who can be a different character in everything he does. So like he was
Right.
great as Kang, and he's a very different character in this movie. Like I wasn't sure if he was going to be just like stereotypical villain, which like
Hmm.
in some aspect, like in some parts of it he kind of is, but he also has more to him than that. It's pretty interesting.
Hmm.
Um but I really like the cinematography in this movie. There are a
Okay.
couple they
Yeah.
do a couple cool things that the other Creed and Rocky movies have not done,
Hmm.
and I think that was really cool. Like some like the fight choreography was probably might have been the best out of the whole like Creed and Rocky franchise. I mean, overall the
Hmm.
Creed movies have better fight choreography because they're newer and have better
Right.
technology and can get better angles. But
Hmm.
yeah, so there was one shot at the beginning that was really cool, kind of showing it was like these really cool slow motion shots, but they like showed different angles and it was really cool.
Hmm.
And then there's a scene at the end, the final fight, where um, they show like how focused the two characters are like on each other, that like the entire crowd fades away and it's just like
Hmm.
the ring in like this black expanse kind of thing. And it's pretty cool how they did that. I feel like it got a bit distracting because they added a few other things to it, but it was
Hmm.
pretty cool. I did like that, and there were a couple like they did a really good job with like wide and close up shots, kind of mixing the two throughout the movie, which I thought was good.
Interesting.
I think the beginning of the movie was super solid. The first half was like
Hmm.
really engrossing and really like developed the relationship between Adonis, Michael B. Jordan's character, and Jonathan Major's character, Dame.
Hmm.
I feel like after there was like an inciting incident towards the middle where you realize that Jonathan Major's character is, an antagonist. He's the villain of the story. And
Hmm.
I feel like the rest of the movie gets a little bit disjointed after. Well, not disjointed, but like I'm trying to think of the word, but it definitely um, feels a little less put together, I guess. It
Hmm.
I feel like things just happen too quickly. The first half of the movie really took its time. and then the
Mhm.
last half I feel like loses its way a little bit. Kind of just being like, oh well, this happens, then this happens, and this happens, and we have to get to the fight, so we're just gonna like make have this assumption happen and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So I feel like the first half was super good. The second half was decent, but not amazing. And then the end was pretty good.
Mhm.
So all in all, pretty solid movie. I feel like these Creed movies, there hasn't been a significant drop in quality in all of them, so that's good. And this is probably at the bottom though of all three,
Okay.
but pretty solid anyway. So
Mhm.
yeah, definitely go see it if you're a fan of the Creed movies and Rocky movies and all that stuff. But yeah, now Cocaine Bear. Um,
Mhm.
this movie has been kind of crazy because it like it looked ridiculous. Everyone thought it looked ridiculous, but I feel like everyone
Mhm.
simultaneously just kind of got on the bandwagon. Like, yeah, this is ridiculous, but like it looks funny, you know.
Right.
Um, so this is actually a movie directed by Elizabeth Banks,
Mhm.
and her movies have been kind of not super well received.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what else she directed. I know she directed
Was it Charlie's Angels, the
yeah,
new
she
one?
directed Charlie's Angels. Nobody
Yeah.
liked that, and she was all like, "Well, people just hate female-led movies." I'm like, "Well, okay." But she also directed Pitch Perfect 2, I believe,
Pitch Perfect. Yeah.
which I haven't seen either of those, so I don't have any sort of
No, I haven't seen either, if any of them
opinion.
either. But
But but this is definitely seems like her best movie.
mm,
Given the responses to it.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So let me pull up the box office real quick. So
Mm,
I mean, it hasn't made a bunch of money.
right.
So it had a $23 million opening weekend, which was pretty good
Mm,
for the movie, and then but it really hasn't gotten much since then. It's only made about 39 million so
okay.
far.
Do you know what the
Um,
budget was?
let me see if I can find it. But I mean, I think a big thing with that is it came out last weekend, and Creed
Right.
3 just came out the weekend.
Yeah, and then
This
Ant-Man as well, probably.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it came out a week after Ant Man, and then a week before Creed. So okay, so the budget was 30 to 35 million.
Yeah.
So it's already made a little more than the budget, but not exactly a huge success. But at the same time,
Hmm.
it's been getting a lot of good word of mouth for the most part, and it's got a surprisingly decent critic score of 69%. So it's
Yeah.
technically fresh, and it's
Right.
got a 74% of for an audience score, which is like a way better critic score than like Ant Man got,
Hmm.
which is like I find really interesting because I feel like people like a lot of the criticisms of Ant Man were that it was like too goofy and stupid and stuff, and didn't have much,
Hmm.
character development. But that's like exactly what this movie had. Like it
Right.
was goofy. There wasn't really that much character development, whatever. But nobody
Hmm.
cared, and it's got like a 70%. So I don't know. I mean,
Right.
it's an
Right.
Ant Man movie. I'm not really sure what people were expecting, but yeah.
Hmm.
So there's that. But yeah. So what did you think of this movie overall?
Um, I don't know. There were a couple of moments that I really liked that
Hmm.
were because like the marketing in this movie was like it's going to be crazy, like this is just
Yeah.
violent, crazy violent,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and there was a couple of scenes like that, but for the most
Yes.
part, I felt like it was didn't really live up to that.
Hmm.
And I especially didn't like the ending when they tried to make it like wholesome and like, oh, every
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't like that. I would have just preferred if it was just like crazy all the way through and then like
Hmm.
cut the ending. Because like right at the beginning of the final scene at the waterfall, when
Hmm.
they go to the kid and they're like, oh, the baby cubs have cocaine too, and they're like, oh no, they're fine. And you're like, okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was some parts that I liked. I saw it with my friend, and
Hmm.
he basically said that it felt like if the MCU made an R-rated movie, and like I kind of see what he's talking about
Yeah.
because it's very a lot of it's very safe, I feel.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I feel like the kills that they showed were pretty good.
Yeah.
I did like
Yeah.
that, but yeah, like the main premise of the movie, because it was based on a true story
Hmm.
where cocaine like fell, was thrown off an airplane into a national park and a bear got
Yeah.
into it, but in real life the bear just overdosed and had a heart attack and died. Whereas
Right.
in this the premise is, well, what if it didn't die, and what if it, got just
Hmm.
like really high and went on a rampage? And I feel like there wasn't much of a rampage.
Right.
Which yeah, that was like my main beef. Like I really liked a lot of it. Like the first half, I think I was like really engaged with it. It was fun. It was
Hmm.
funny, and like I got the premise. I got enough of the characters to like be like, yeah, they're here, cool. Let's see what goes on with them, I guess. And
Hmm.
then we had the bear killing people. Like I think, what was it? Oh yeah, we kind of didn't get to see a whole lot of the bear killing that hiker.
Right. In the
so
beginning. Yeah.
so I was starting to feel like, oh, is this gonna be like a lot of cutting away and stuff and like just
Hmm.
suggested gore? But then there was
Right.
like that one kill of the bear killing that guy in the tree and like cut his leg, not his leg off,
Yeah.
basically. And you're like, oh, okay.
Right.
And then that ambulance chain scene
Mm.
was really good,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
feel like maybe they blew their whole budget on that. And then
Yeah.
they're like, oh, well, now we have a whole like other half of a movie. Let's just have a bunch of like people involved with the cocaine,
Mhm.
just like having a standoff with like this cop, because I
Right.
feel like they
Right.
spent a lot of time on that cop with the drug lord's son and
Hmm.
the other two guys, and I feel like the whole rest of the movie was like them and the main drug lord guy, and I was getting kind of bored because I'm like, we
Right.
haven't really seen the bear do much for the
Hmm.
last 20
Hmm.
minutes, and then
Yeah.
finally they had an ending where she killed the drug boss guy, but I feel like the last half I was really just like they focused a lot on the characters, and I just like didn't care. I just wanted to see the bear doing more
Right.
killing.
Right.
So yeah, overall, I it was pretty fun, but definitely could have been more fun if they had just
Yeah.
committed to like a bear's rampaging and killing everybody.
Hmm. Hmm.
If there had
Right.
been like at least one, if not two or three more scenes like that ambulance scene, it would have been
Right.
really, really good. But
Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
like it was still enjoyable. But I probably
Yeah.
wouldn't. I don't know. I might watch it again just for those scenes, but I wouldn't.
Hmm.
Like it's not like a movie like I have to add this to my collection and all that.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and yeah, it definitely feels like a crazy movie for general audiences. As in,
Mm.
general audiences who were used to like freaking, like MCU movies and stuff, go to see this,
Right.
and you're like, wow, that was so intense. Oh, so much gore, you
Hmm.
know? And so
Hmm.
then the word of mouth goes around that like, wow, it's so gory and crazy. And then
Right.
people who are more used to seeing like more crazy stuff are like, I mean, I guess
Yeah.
kind of like your friends said, like if the MCU made an R-rated movie, like it's definitely like
Right.
an R-rated movie, but it's kind of made for general audiences.
Hmm.
It's not
Hmm.
too, which I mean, I get it because they probably want to make money, but then again, it's not really making that
Yeah.
much money, so yeah,
Right. Right.
But at the same time, it's getting mostly positive press, so
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you had to give it a rating, what would you rate it? Like out of 10 or something? Wonder.
Um, maybe like a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I was thinking, yeah, probably like between 6 and 6.5 for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it was all right. But so anyway, yeah, let's move on to All Star Superman. I
All
mean,
right.
definitely go see it if you're into that. Like, it's definitely worth watching at least once, just because it's just for the fun parts. And the
Yeah.
like that performance is like Alden Ehrenreich is that's to say
Hmm.
his name. He was good, and so was Miss what's his name, Ice Cube's son. I always forget his name.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was he was good in it, and
And
I mean all
Ray Liotta, the crime
Ray
lord.
Ray Liotta, yeah.
Yeah, this is his
That
last
was like
movie.
his last movie, yeah. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, all
Yeah.
all all the performances were pretty solid. They struck a pretty good balance of like being,
Hmm.
you know, goofy but at the same time being pretty good performances. But then again,
Yeah.
I do feel like there was a little bit of a disconnect, like when there was like a giant bear, like a bloodthirsty bear, and they're like, oh no, it's a bear on cocaine. There like
Mhm.
wasn't a whole lot of like, oh my god, it's a bear on cocaine.
Right. Right.
Um, but yeah, so let's move to All Star Superman. All right, so All Star Superman. Now, we're gonna be talking mostly about the animated movie. We did talk about the comic itself on our Cultured Polish show for the Cultured Nerd. So yeah, if you want to check that out, check out either I'm gonna leave a link in the description to our 2 episode show on it, or you can just go to the Cultured Nerds YouTube channel. But yeah,
Mhm.
we definitely had a fun time. I'd never read the
Yeah.
comic before.
Mhm.
I had watched the animated movie like years ago, but I forgot most of it.
Right.
But yeah, so the general premise of the movie is basically Superman goes to save this guy, Doctor Quintum, who's trying to like I think steal sun from the earth or something, or steal fire from the sun, and
Mm.
then but then this crony that Lex Luthor is actually controlling remotely like blows up and like starts destroying the whole ship, and then Superman ends up coming and saving everybody, but he gets exposed to so much solar radiation his cells can't handle it. So he's basically
Mhm.
got a year to live. He's slowly dying. His cells are breaking down, and this was Lex Luthor's plan the whole time. So then Superman goes through like a bunch of different stuff. He basically it's kind of Superman's bucket list in a way,
Mm.
because like he gives Lois superpowers for a day. He reveals a secret identity to her, but I don't think she ever believes that he's Superman like the entire movie,
Right.
which is true to the comic too. She just kind of thinks he's doing like an impression of Clark, I guess. Um, and then what else? Yeah, I'm trying to remember like what was in the movie and what was in the comic because it blended together a bit to me,
Right.
you know. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so he does a bunch of other stuff, and then there's not a whole lot in the middle, like there was in the comic. There was a lot like between the
Right.
beginning and the end, but
And I almost feel like it would have been better if they just, instead of making one movie, if they made a bunch of like smaller animated
yeah,
shorts, they could adapt each issue into its own like
yeah,
30-minute thing.
yeah. That would have been fun, like a mini series.
Yeah.
And then yeah, he has a super powered arm wrestling contest.
Hmm.
He and then like towards the end, Lex Luthor is actually in prison for this whole thing because he gets arrested at the beginning of the movie, and he's actually being
Right.
sent to the electric chair. Which we didn't
Hmm.
talk about this when we did a comic review, but why the hell are they using an electric chair? Like most of this seems pretty modern. Like even though it's going
Hmm.
for the golden age, like kind of an homage to the golden age of Superman, it doesn't take place in like the 50s,
Right.
40s. So like,
Right.
why are they using the electric chair?
There was a line in the beginning of the movie that Lois said they were going to reinstate the electric chair just for
Oh,
Lex Luthor,
that's kind of
which is pretty
fucked.
crazy.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah, that's like wow. I mean, he's evil, but damn,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that's still pretty inhumane.
Hmm.
Yeah. So Lex ends up going to the electric chair, but he asked for some cocktail like as a final request, which nobody seems to pre-screen.
Right.
And he just takes the
Right.
cocktail, but it turns out that it was actually a potion or like some sort of chemical thing that
Hmm.
gives him Superman's powers for 24 hours.
Right.
It's the same thing that Superman made for Lois, but he was able to steal the formula by hacking into one of his Fortress's
Hmm.
robots. So he
Hmm.
has powers now, and he's going on a rampage. Meanwhile, Superman is dying. Plus,
Yeah.
Lex Luthor teamed up with this future alien cyborg computer son thing called Solaris, which I don't
Hmm.
think the actual movie explained. Like what he was. He was just sort of like a sun being that showed
Right.
up, and Superman went to go fight him with his robots, using a solar protective suit, which
Hmm.
because Superman kind of got caught on to Lex Luthor once he realized one of his robots was malfunctioning. So he already had a plan set in place for Solaris and for
Yeah.
Lex. So he goes and fights Solaris. He ends up beating the crap out of it and sending it down to Earth. And here's one of the biggest differences between the movie and the comic. In the comic, they really explain in depth for a little bit, like that Solaris is from the future. Like I think Lois knows who he is, like has heard of him because he's from the
Yeah.
future, and I guess in the future he reforms and like becomes a
Hmm.
good guy. But in this, he's a villain, so we know he's gonna survive in the comic, and
Hmm.
Superman beats the crap out of him, and then he's laying in the street saying mercy, and Superman goes like, "Don't worry, this won't kill you," and he proceeds to like punch him more, and this kind
Right.
of starts his rehabilitation.
Hmm.
Whereas in the movie, it seems like he just straight up kills him.
Yeah.
Yeah, they also go on to explain that he's a compute like an artificial sun computer from the future, which
Mm.
in the movie they don't really say. And so when Solaris says mercy, Superman says like I don't think I have any left, and just straight up like
Uh,
nerfs him.
yeah.
So that then they kind of suggest that Solaris dies then. But Solaris had double crossed Luthor at this point and poisoned the sun, so it's turning blue, which will presumably eventually kill all life on Earth. Um,
Hmm.
so Superman is dying at this point, and he like runs to the Daily Planet to like publish this story he's already written on Superman dying, and he passes out. It seems like he's dead, and then Luthor comes to attack the Daily Planet, and Superman pops or Clark pops back up and is like, "No, I'm still alive." Which in the
Hmm.
book, we see that he actually did kind of die for a second there, and he
Right.
kind of went to an afterlife and talked to his dad.
Hmm.
So they cut that out of the movie, and
Yeah.
then he ends up pulling a gravity gun out of his jacket and shoots Luthor with it, which eventually there is like a fight that ensues, and he says that he predicted all of this that Luthor was going to do. He figured it all out, which presumably is because of his heightened intelligence. I don't remember if they said it
Hmm.
in the movie, but in the book, the he got a few extra powers from
Right.
being exposed to so much solar energy, including like bioelectric field, as well as
Hmm.
just heightened intelligence and curiosity and everything. So presumably he was able to figure out Luthor's plan that easily because of
Right.
that. But he uses the gravity gun basically to increase Lex Luthor's like because gravity is like related to time or whatever in this. He's
Hmm.
able to speed up Lex's metabolism, so he is it the 24-hour powers only last for like a few seconds after that, but Lex is
Right.
able to see what Superman sees. He's able to see like the connection between all the forces, and and able to
Hmm.
see how everything on Earth connects to each other, including people. um
Yeah.
and Superman, Lex tries to use another vial of the serum, but Superman takes it from him and is like, no, 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 and then
Hmm.
Lex says something along the lines of, if it weren't for you, I could have saved the world. And Superman says, if saving the world really mattered to you, you could have done it by now.
Hmm.
And Lex says, yeah, you're right. And Superman realizes, he's the only thing that can save the sun, so he says goodbye to Lois. At this point, he's almost becoming energy, and so he
Hmm.
goes up to the sun and basically just explodes into solar energy and saves the sun. And then the main thing at the end is Lex Luthor ends up giving Doctor Quintum, that guy at the beginning who was trying to do experiments on the sun. He gives him Superman's DNA sequence,
Hmm.
his genetic code, which will
Right.
give Quintum the ability to make a new Superman, basically, but it has to be implanted in a human ovum. So it's suggested that they're basically going to make Superman's son like with Lois, and kind of
Hmm.
have that
Hmm.
happen. So that's how it ends. So it's obviously like not a typical Superman story because he dies in the end.
Right.
But yeah, we kind of talked about this on our show. But what do you think of this movie and how it compares to the comic?
Yeah, I think that it works better as like a narrative, like as one movie, like
Yeah.
I kind of mentioned, because like the comics are mostly one shots that loosely cut tie together. But I feel like for the movie, you got to kind of streamline that. And I think they did that pretty well, and they
Mm-hmm.
sort of like drop a lot of the standalone issues.
Yeah.
Although all the issues were good, they don't all fit into the main story, so they had to drop some of them
Yeah.
to kind of make the main narrative tighter. And I think that they did that pretty well.
Yeah, because the issues, some of them were connected, but a lot of them were kind of just one shots. Even
Right.
though it's all considered All Star Superman, they and all kind of part of the same narrative. They were kind of disjointed.
Hmm.
Which you said like that is one of my main critiques of the comic is it feels a bit disjointed
Right.
compared to the movie. There were some things that cut out of the movie that I wish they had kept in the middle because
Hmm.
it kind of jumps from issue like 5 to like issue like 9 9 or 10 pretty
Right.
quickly, which works in an hour and 16-minute movie.
Yeah.
but I kind of wish, like you said, I kind of wish they'd made it a mini series
Mm,
and kind of
yeah.
tackled each issue because I feel like they did such a good job adapting what was from the comic in the movie. I kind of wish they had adapted some of the other stuff.
Right.
Like there's this whole plot line with Bizarro World and Superman
Mm,
gets trapped on Bizarro World. I wish they'd kept that. That was one of my favorite parts of it.
yeah, yeah, that was great.
So yeah, but yeah, it was a pretty good movie, and I they did a really good job. Like even though animation didn't look exactly the same as the art, obviously because it's a different artist,
Yeah.
it still like emulated it really well. Like I think all
Hmm.
the colors were like the same, like
Yeah.
everything looked the same, like down to the costumes and all the character designs from the comic. They made them look like exactly the same. It was a really good.
Hmm.
It was probably the most accurate like comic to animation adaptation I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Um, which I thought was pretty cool. They didn't really change. They didn't really change a whole lot. The main change was that Lex Luthor gave Quintum Superman's genetic code instead of Superman giving it to him.
Right.
Which we did talk a bit about that on our other show, but it kind of gives Lex Luthor more of a character arc and a
Hmm.
redemption moment
Yeah.
than the actual comic did, which I kind of liked better.
Right.
Um, Yeah, but yeah, so this movie, well, technically, the comic is going to be an inspiration for the new Superman movie.
Right.
Um, which James Gunn, like, which was kind of obvious, but James Gunn said like it's going to be more adapting the tone and certain elements than
Hmm.
the, actual story itself. Which there are already a few influences from the story that you can see on like say Man of Steel or something.
Right.
But I feel like this is going to adapt the tone a lot more,
Hmm.
which is going to be interesting because this whole movie is based off of an older Superman is at the end of his life, whereas Superman Legacy is going to be more towards the beginning of his
Right.
career as Superman.
Hmm.
So I guess what would you want to see them adapt from the comic slash movie in Superman Legacy? Because
Hmm.
that does kind of leave a big open door for what they could adapt.
Right. Yeah, so I think I have two answers for that.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite part of the comic was definitely the Bizarro thing, so I would love to see that in a movie.
Yeah.
But I feel like as far as like a first Superman movie, you'd probably want to do something with Lex Luthor.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe like the Lois Lane superpower thing, and Lex Luthor shows up with his own concoction. I think something like that would work for a first like introduction to Superman movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean the Bizarro stuff was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, yeah, I feel like because we do know this Superman Legacy isn't going to be an origin story.
Right.
So I think just kind of adapting the whole like everything is established already,
Hmm.
like this book does, because it kind of builds off of everything that came before, even though it's kind of its own standalone thing. So I feel like if
Right.
they kind of do like that and don't do too much explaining, and
Hmm.
just kind of jump right into it. And anything that isn't super clear gets kind of like explained through conversations and stuff. Just kind of already
Yeah.
have an established like Superman, Lois, all that stuff. Don't necessarily, see Clark get hired. He's already been working at the Daily Planet for like a year. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
kind of like what Superman and Lois does, but like towards the beginning of everything.
Right.
That would be cool. Just like kind of all the relationships are already established, between Clark and Lois and Jimmy and everything.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
already give Jimmy the Superman watch,
Right.
stuff like that, without you know leaving too much like unanswered. Also, the
Hmm.
way this the book opened and the way the movie opened too had very quick like glances of Superman's origin with
Mm.
with like
Yeah.
one word like dying planet, like kindly couple, so and so. So I
Hmm.
think if they opened that the Superman Legacy movie like that would actually be really cool because it
Yeah.
would give like a really brief like oh yeah, just a reminder this is Superman's story without
Hmm.
giving a whole like spiel, or
Right.
either that just kind of like quick flashes, some quick scenes, or maybe kind of like what the Incredible Hulk did, and like
Mm.
show stuff during the credits, like the opening credits kind of thing. So
Right.
you kind of get a sense of, what is in the Superman world and what isn't, but we don't need a whole crash course on Superman's origin.
Hmm. Hmm.
Kind of like Spider Man, like the MCU Spider Man. did,
Right.
but I think a little more because I feel like they leave a little bit too much open in that. Um,
Hmm.
but because they like don't mention Uncle Ben like at all. Like they have very
Yeah.
subtle clues to him, but that's about it. But yeah, so I think that, and I
Yeah.
think like the overall tone would be cool. I feel like
Yeah.
this and a mix of like the Superman animated series from the '90s would be pretty cool to see.
Hmm.
Because I feel
Hmm.
like the main thing I have a problem with this story is how I don't like it when they make Clark too bumbling. Like I
Mm.
feel like there needs to be a definite difference between Clark and Superman, or else everyone would guess who he is.
Right.
It's already pretty, but at the same time, it's pretty easy to make him seem like a parody of a person if he's just
Hmm.
like tripping over things all the time.
Right.
I'm not a huge fan of that. So kind of have a mix of him being like a lot, very different person than Superman, but not making him like a total idiot,
Hmm.
kind of thing, which I feel like this comic kind of does. I know they're trying to emulate, the Golden Age, but
Right.
I do hope the movie doesn't do that, which I'm pretty sure the movie is supposed to focus mainly on Clark Kent,
Mm.
being a reporter and all that stuff. So I feel like they're probably not going to, because how is the audience supposed to really connect to Superman, to Clark, if he's just
Right.
some bumbling idiot the whole time.
Hmm.
Maybe like a couple scenes where he puts on like a bit of a show, but you really have to connect to Clark,
Right.
which I think this book is really just like a Superman story. Like Clark is in
Mm.
it, but Clark is almost just like
Right.
a skin he wears to accomplish a couple tasks.
Hmm. Hmm.
Superman is the main focus, where I feel like Clark is giving more than the main focus of legacy. So
Right.
yeah, I guess we'll see going forward, but I feel like it could be a really good movie, if they adapt the right things and add some things. But yeah, overall, what did you think? Going back to All Star Superman, what were your, I guess, overall, like, I guess, what would you give it as a rating, or just like
Hmm.
final one sentence thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of like the classic Golden Age
Yeah.
Superman, but I feel like they did a pretty good job with it. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I liked it overall. I'd probably say like a 7 or 8 out of 10.
Yeah, same. Because I think it just did a really good job. It did a lot of unique things with Superman that we haven't seen before, and it kind of had,
Hmm.
the guts to um, kill him.
Right.
And like you said, I'm not a huge fan of Golden Age Superman. I feel like that's just sort of like the caricature of what Superman has become, and everybody just like
Mm.
a lot of Superman fans just want, like they focus on the farm boy Boy Scout aspect of Superman and kind
Hmm.
of ignore all of the evolution and development he's gone through over the last
Right.
like 40 years. Like for me, like my Superman that I grew up with was like the '90s comic Superman, where yeah, he's got that Boy Scout stuff. He's a really kind and just great guy, but he's also just got more personality and depth to him, and he's also like a
Mm.
badass. Like my first
Right.
Superman comic was Death of Superman.
Mm.
So like that version of Superman, where yeah, like he's a great guy, but he's also just like this stoic force standing in the way of people and like unspeakable evil. That's kind of the
Right.
Superman I want to see. So
Mm.
I guess a good mix of that is kind of my would be a good version of Superman on screen. I think like enough to
Hmm.
appease all the people who are like, I want to see him save cats from trees, and the
Right.
people more like me who are more into like seeing the super powerful, heroic Superman. Um,
Hmm.
I think that would be cool to see. So I think this movie, like you said, is probably like a seven, probably like a
Yeah.
7.5 for me. It did a really good job adapting the comics, and the comics were really good. But I wouldn't say it's like my favorite version of Superman, even though
Right.
it's become
Right.
like an iconic story.
Hmm.
But yeah, that is the episode. Unless you had anything else to say.
Nope. I think we pretty much got it.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. New episodes of the podcast come out every other Monday, and the video version of the podcast comes out the following Monday on our YouTube channel, casual underscore experts for pretty much all the social media, I think.
Mhm.
And yeah, thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.